So, welcome to the summit about who you really are and the whole no self. And I have a speaker who has written a beautiful book that I read, and I just absolutely love it. And her name is Joan Tollifson, and she's a writer and lifelong explorer of what is. And her background includes Buddhism, Ayurveda, non-traditional meditative inquiry, radical non-duality, martial arts, somatic work, addiction recovery, political activism, visual arts, and a devotion to both boundless presence and the beauty of the ordinary. So welcome, Joan.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And can you show us your book? Because you have the hardcover right there.
Sure.
All right. Death, the End of Self-Improvement. Yeah. Thank you. And so what does that mean? Death and the end of self-improvement. What does that have to do with who we really are?
I intended the title to be somewhat humorous and also liberating because I think as a culture we're kind of obsessed with self-improvement and rooted in a sense of deficiency and lack. And so I was pointing beyond that kind of obsession with self-improvement, which has now sort of entered in, now that we baby boomers are aging and dying, that has all, of course, moved to the forefront of the culture, as it always does when the baby boomers get there. So, so we're hearing a lot about aging and dying, and a lot of it is sort of along the lines of anti-aging workshops and trying to deny or defy aging. Whereas my approach is more about embracing it and embracing the kind of falling apart that is part of aging. And I've compared that in a way to the awakening journey, which is also a journey where many things are lost. You know, we kind of lose various beliefs and ideas that we have. And so it's a book about death and aging. And what did you ask? Did you ask how it related to something else?
Who you really are, like
who we really are. Well, right now, if we just tune in to what's here, you know, there's an undeniable knowingness of being here, being present, being aware. And that's really the only thing that we absolutely cannot doubt. This aware presence, which if we don't refer to thought or memory, it has no age, no gender, no nationality, no boundaries, no beginning, no end. We could also call it here now, meaning the eternal present or presence and the unlocatable immediacy of here, where every location shows up. And at the same time that we are this boundless, indivisible presence that is showing up as the entire universe, we are also a particular person. You know, I'm Joan and you're Susan. And so to me, this whole no self thing isn't about denying the person or abolishing the person or getting rid of the person. There's obviously something here that we call Joan and something there that we call Susan. But what is it? You know, if we really start to look closely at it, if we look closely at the body, we find sensations that are ever changing. We find if we look at it with science, we find a dance of all kinds of things going on. It's never the same body from one instant to the next. If we look at the mind, well, we can't even find the mind, but there are ever-changing thoughts. Sensations are ever-changing. There's a kind of pattern here. Maybe you could identify certain characteristics that make Joan a unique flavor, different from any other flavor. Every snowflake, every person is absolutely unique, but we can't really pin down what that flavor is because it's not really a solid fixed thing. So when we really look for Joan or Susan, we can't really get hold of anything that's fixed or persisting, and we can't separate it really out from the rest of the universe. I mean, we wouldn't be here without air and water and sunlight and everything really in the whole universe. So I think, to me, the no self pointer is really pointing to seeing through, like, we have a sense that there's this me kind of inside the body looking out at this external world, and that this me is somehow thinking my thoughts and making my choices and living my life. And that, to me, is the illusion, that me, because when we look for that me who's supposedly inside here somewhere, kind of running the Joan show, we don't really find anything. But there's certainly, a body, personality, flavor, whatever, something here that we call Joan and something that we call Susan that we can't deny. And yet it's not the same Joan that was here 2 minutes ago or 70 years ago, certainly. So we are both this vast presence and this particular individual. It's kind of like the metaphor that's often used, which I really love, is the ocean and the waves. We are a wave in the ocean, and the waves are never separate from the ocean. They are the ocean. They are a movement of the ocean. You can't really separate them from the other waves or from the totality of the ocean. And when we really see that and feel that and grok that deeply, there's no fear of death anymore, because you see that death is moment to moment. I mean, and in a way, nothing dies, and in another sense, everything is dying moment to moment to moment. So the ocean, it'd be like a wave worrying about, oh my God, what will happen to me if I fall back into the ocean? It's like worrying about what would happen to me. Like people used to worry about what would happen to them if they fell off the edge if they sailed out into the ocean and fell off the edge of the earth, which they thought was flat. And, it was a fear based on a false picture of reality and our fear of death. And I'm not talking about the biological fear of death that we have, if we suddenly see that a car is coming straight towards us. There's a physical, instinctual fear that's part of our survival system. But I'm talking about the psychological fear of death, where we sit around worrying about what will happen to me after I die and all of that. That just, you don't have that if you see clearly that you're a waving of the ocean. And as one Thich Nhat Hanh, one Zen teacher, said, you don't have to stop being a wave to realize that you're the ocean.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. Because I think there's a sort of tendency in some non-dual teachings to just kind of say that the whole person in every sense is an illusion. And, people talk about not being a person anymore at all. And to me, that's kind of absurd.
Yeah, because although this form may not be what we think it is still there somehow, right? It's not like there's no form at all. It's maybe we kind of confused about how this body mind is in relation to the world and stuff. Would you say that maybe we're a little confused about who we are?
Yeah, I think we're very confused because as we grow up, we identify as this little me who seems to be encapsulated inside this body, and then we feel separate. And particularly, I mean, I don't think this maybe is as true in some Eastern cultures where humanity was always seen as kind of embedded in the fabric of existence in a way that in Western culture, though, I think we have a much more kind of perspective where we are conditioned from early on to feel like we're encapsulated and separate from the universe, from life. And then as soon as we identify as that little separate me, we naturally feel incomplete and lacking in some way and frightened because, you know, the body can be wiped out at any moment. It can experience, it can go through horrible pain and all kinds of things. So it's a scary kind of identity. And we also get very caught up as human beings in the conceptual world. And as soon as we start getting language, we begin to mistake the map for the territory, as someone famously put it. And the word water is not water. And that seems incredibly obvious, like, of course. But in fact, we mistake the map for the territory all the time in very subtle ways that are so ubiquitous and so common and so all pervasive that we don't even notice or recognize that we're doing it. I mean, even just talking about the body, there really, as we've just sort of said, there isn't really a body that you can get hold of. And yet when we have the word body, it sounds like a very solid, substantial, persisting thing. And Joan sounds like a very solid, substantial, persisting thing. So we kind of, we get very lost really in the conceptual world and spend a lot of our time trying to solve conceptual problems that don't even exist. Like, what will happen to me after I die? It's just kind of, we're worrying about something that really isn't even there, and a situation that's completely imaginary. So it's, I think it's, and of course we have this amazing capacity as human beings to remember the past and to anticipate the future. And that's a beautiful functional capacity in some ways. I mean, it's gotten us to the moon and things like that, but it can also, it's a double-edged sword because, we can also imagine all the things that could go wrong, all the terrible things that could happen, or all the great things that could happen. And, and spend our whole lives kind of lost in thought about trying to avoid and chase these phantoms instead of just being awake right here, right now to the amazing wonder of what actually is. And we can't really say what this is, as soon as, like, we spend, again, a lot of time in the spiritual world trying to pin down, well, is it consciousness or is it the brain or, is it this or is it that? And these are all concepts, really. They're words, it's like, but what is this right here now? What is it? You can put labels on it, but the labels aren't it. What is it? And when you really just are present to it as it's quite alive and wondrous and miraculous and then if you start thinking about it, you can get really confused, which is what we do.
Yeah. And which is okay too, I guess, because it's natural to think as a human, right? We have thoughts, and that's how we can.
Well, yeah. I mean, thinking is a wonderful, there can be functional thinking and creative thinking and some thinking that I just call chewing gum thinking that's kind of harmless. And then there's the kind of thinking that's really a form of suffering, like thinking I've ruined my life, I'm a terrible person, I'll never get it, I'm a failure. That's suffering, or thinking you've ruined my life, you're a terrible person, that's suffering. So, and I don't think of it in terms of okay or not okay, good or bad, because whatever is here, it's part of what is, but obviously some things we can discern the difference between things that are a form of suffering and things that bring us happiness and joy and peace.
Yeah. So it's like the thinking and feelings and, you know, the perceptions, our ideas and concepts and attitude and all that is part of being a human. And it's fine for everything to be there in the whole spectrum of all that that's happening. And that's kind of the adventure, I guess. In your book, can you hold up your book again? Yeah, yeah. So I like also the cover. It's a human, but it's very abstract.
I did that drawing.
Yeah. So it's like that, you know, being a human with everything that happens in a human life is is just fine. And it's just happening. That's life happening.
Yes, except, you know, sometimes when people say that in the non-dual subculture, what they kind of leave out of everything that's happening is our capacity for discernment and, you know, like everything is part of what is. Everything is okay in that sense. But like I often give the example that of Hitler and Buddha, you know, like they were both equally manifestations of what is. They are both equally the ocean. They are both equally water. And yet it's very clear that Hitler was operating out of the delusion of separation and duality. Whereas it's very clear that Buddha was operating out of being awake to wholeness. He was operating out of a sense of the whole. He was coming from a very different place than Hitler. So on the one hand, they're both part of what is. They're both part of the ocean. They're equally ocean, equally water. But clearly, one of them realizes that, and the other one is operating out of the delusion of being a separate wave, separate from the ocean, separate from the other waves, and trying to extinguish the other waves. You know, it's like, so we have this capacity to discern the difference and, you know, and to come up with things like meditation and non-duality and things like this event you're having, and as a way of kind of opening all this up and exploring it and seeing through our delusions. So
Yeah. It's because somewhere maybe all of us, we know that we are that undescribable presence, or at the same time it's we don't really know it, right? It's like, and but then listening to people who have, you know, have realized it, it helps somewhere that something does happen.
Exactly, yeah. And, you know, just, I think we're actually experiencing it. It's our experience every moment, really. You know, I mean, every moment we are having the direct experience of vast, boundless presence and human beingness. They're both there in every moment, but we're not necessarily recognizing them, is the thing. You know, we're lost in thought, and thought by nature is very dualistic. So, you know, again, like this manifestation can't appear without polarities. You can't have up without down. But we get caught up conceptually in the idea that the light should conquer the dark, you know, that good should conquer evil, that you know, so we're very caught up in sort of a dualistic battle kind of mentality, conflict mentality. And there's a place for, you know, having opinions and differences of opinion, and, you know, working for certain things and not other things. You know, there's a place for like working against racism or whatever, you know, but at the same time, if we're doing that from the perspective of separation and this kind of dualistic mentality, we're going to go about it in a very different way than if we're coming at it from this perspective of wholeness, and from, just we can just tune in any moment to just this sort of vastness that's here, this spaciousness, this beingness, this wholeness.
Yeah. So it's almost, we're not lost in the mind. We are automatically, we automatically know it or realize it in a way.
Yeah, I think a lot of spiritual work, so to speak, is about a kind of shift of attention from being completely caught up in the conceptual thinking mind to being awake to both this boundless presence, the spaciousness that's here right now, and just the beauty. If you're like I often say, just looking at the most ordinary objects, if you're really seeing them, there's beauty in everything, but so often we're not really even seeing it. We're like, we have a label for it, and it's like, look at this. It's like a Kleenex. Ugh, no good. But if you're really seeing it, it's beautiful, and that's what art does a lot of the time. Like artists, have that kind of, they do see the beauty in everything, and sometimes through works of art and movies and so on, we are opened up to that. And I think that's a lot what spiritual work is also doing, is just waking us up to what's actually already here. It's not something we don't already have. It's not something mysterious that's, we have to go and find or something. It's right here. It's just about noticing it, recognizing it, waking up to it. And kind of, it's not about banishing all thinking, because that is never going to happen. And some thinking is quite necessary. It's just about that a lot of our thinking is not necessary. A lot of it is suffering. And that there's this whole other dimension of life that we're kind of tuned out of because we're so absorbed in thinking.
Yeah. So it's like we're seeking something to fill us up, but if we just know who we are, we are all that. We feel complete in, just like you said, in just being here right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a complete.
Yeah, there's a completeness in just being present, just being here. And at the same time, it does seem to be part of our nature that we are like reaching for and I notice like all the plants, they're reaching for the light, they're reaching for the sun, they're reaching for the light. And it's like the universe is kind of evolving. It's like reaching for something, it's evolving. And in some way, we have this kind of inbuilt interest in exploring and, so, and I can distinguish between that and the kind of seeking that is rooted in a sense of lack and deficiency, where we're like, and we're caught up in sort of like people desperately seeking enlightenment or something, and we have these ideas that it's some fantastic finish line experience that some people have had, and I'm seeking it and I don't have it, and I've got to find it, and where is it? And that has a very different quality. That has a very kind of addictive, compulsive, suffering quality to it. And it's very different from the kind of exploration where, like the kind of exploration that children have just naturally, where they're just babies, they're just exploring the world, or the lover exploring, if you're in love with someone, just exploring the beloved, when you're making love or something, it's like that kind of exploration has, or a scientist who's really interested in exploring, or a meditator who's exploring, what's going on in the mind. This is really interesting. What is this sense of self? Not like, which is a really different spirit than coming at it from, well, I read a book and it said there's no self, and now I'm trying to lose myself, and oops, I still think I have a sense of self, but I'm trying really hard to lose it, and oh, I'm sure that person lost it, and I want to be like them, and that's desperation and addiction and suffering. But this exploring is just open and delightful. So it's a very different quality, and we can discern the difference, when we're doing one or the other. And I think we all, can fall into both of them at times, because I think, it's just a human thing that sometimes there is that sense of lack or restlessness or whatever it is that, kind of like drives us to go eat a cookie or smoke a cigarette or grab a spiritual book or something, and it
Yeah.
But what really what is that itch? That's kind of the explorative way of looking at it, is like when that itch comes up, that feeling of like, oh, I've got to get something, a cookie, a cigarette, a book, something, what is that? What is that? What is that feeling? Can we just be with that and, feel it and be curious about it and be interested in it? Not like trying to figure it out, but just like, wow, like a child would, look at an object, like, what is this, and just be with it. And that's a really different kind of approach.
Yeah. And maybe that could also be all the feelings we have, and sometimes very strong feelings. We can just kind of have, oh, what is this feeling I'm having? And oh, it's very strong. Oh, it feels not so good. Or or another feeling can be that, oh, this feels good. What is this feeling? And or can maybe also just, oh, this just feeling happening. And yeah, I mean, but there's that openness, whatsoever is like, there's that openness of just being with whatever comes up and not having to label it as something, put a word on it or label it, because then suddenly it becomes part of a story or something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like as soon as we put a word on something like, oh, this is pain, or this is anger, or this is grief. As soon as we put a word on it, again, we make it into something that seems solid and fixed. And it really isn't. It's just ever-changing sensations and thoughts passing through. And, it's a very dynamic, alive thing, actually. And if we can just be with it, the label might come up. I mean, that's just going to happen. We might think, oh, I'm in pain, I have a headache or whatever. But if we can really just be with it without the label, just being, well, what is this, and just noticing the sensations and feeling the sensations. And when you really are with pain in that way, it's no longer overwhelming. It's interesting. And the same with, difficult feelings, like, the feeling of boredom or restlessness or agitation or anxiety, these feelings that kind of are very difficult. Or anger, there's an enormous energy and power in anger. If we can just tune into the actuality rather than the label. But often we get caught up in sort of expressing the anger. I do that myself, and that's okay too. That happens sometimes. It's part of being human. But it's also possible just to be with the energy of it, the sensation of it, the bare actuality of it, and just be curious about it. What is this? And what is it that I'm defending? If I feel defensive, like, what is that? What is that feeling of defensiveness? What is it that feels threatened? What is that? And just, again, just to be really curious about that, not to sort of come up with an answer or refer to the answer that we read in a book, but just really be curious on our own about, what is this? What is going on here? And again, not with a thinking mind, it's not about thinking it through and analyzing it, but really doing it by awareing it, attending to it, feeling into it, being present to it. And in a way, not even to it, because that makes it sound like I'm outside of it. And really, I am it, it's there's no separation there really. When we're just fully present to these whatevers, there is no separation, there is no gap. If you're just hearing a sound like traffic, for example, if you're just hearing it, it's just whoosh, 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 and it's just right here. There's no separation, there's no me hearing it, but as soon as we start thinking about it, then there's me and it, and maybe, it's bothering me and I wish it were quieter, and, all that sort of thing. But if we're just, even if it's an unpleasant sound, like a, leaf blower or something, if we're just really listening to it, it becomes interesting. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it's just sound happening.
Yeah.
And we don't have to think, oh, this sound is what I am hearing and so on, and I like it or I don't, or it's just sound happening, kind of, right? It's just a happening.
Yeah.
Then everything else is just storytelling, maybe. Everything else is just a story about the sound and a story about somebody listening to a sound, and who knows, is that just the mind that likes to have fun and make stories, or it was taught that or whatever?
Well, stories are, I love stories. Stories are beautiful, but we can, again, discern the difference between stories that are a form of suffering, like I've ruined my life, I don't get it, I'm a loser, and the kind of stories that, for example, if we're watching a really good movie, last night I watched Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and on Netflix. It was a really good movie, and if you're, or you could name any millions of good movies or good plays, if you're going to a play in the theater, or you're reading a good novel. It's a story. Those kind of stories can really awaken us, can show us things that we didn't see before. They can, and if it has beautiful cinematography, it can wake us up to the beauty of the way a good painting does, to the beauty. Like sometimes you go out of the theater after seeing a movie with really good cinematography, and you're awake to the world around you in a whole different way, because it woke you up in some way. So those are great stories. Storytelling is a wonderful part of our human, whatever the universe is doing through human beings. Storytelling is a big part of it. But to discern the difference between the good stories, well, good, I forget that. I don't like to use good and bad, but the stories that are awakening or useful or entertaining, even just entertaining, they're just fun. Like a good comedy, it's just fun, and it makes us laugh, and in a way that's a great release and an opening. It's just beautiful. But there's a difference between that and the kind of stories that we get caught up in our heads about, what you did to me, or what a loser I am, or what's going to happen to me after I die, or that kind of thing.
And also, after I die, or death, because in your book, when it's not just about death, it's actually about everything in life. You got around everywhere, and I love it, and life from so many different perspectives, and the true human experience of life from A to Z, really, and that, because the humanness, that's the form that's appearing right here and now, right? So it's beautiful to be that. There's nothing wrong with that, because this is it, right? This is it in form. This is awareness, or God, or call it what you want, in form. And
exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. It's like they're not really separate. As they say in Buddhism, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. They're not really two things. It's sort of like it's all right here, right now, and yeah, this, whatever this is, it's showing up as all these forms, and so that's beautiful. I don't see that as something to reject or transcend or deny or ignore or push aside, but rather something to delight in and enjoy and explore. And when we really go deeply into form, it reveals itself as emptiness. I mean, if you go really deeply into any form, you don't really find anything solid or substantial in there, and you can't really separate it out from everything else. You can't really get a hold of it even. It's like the body, like when we think about it, it's like, seems like it's very solid, like the picture in the anatomy book. But when we're feeling it as sensation, or when a surgeon cuts into a living body, it's not an anatomy book picture anymore. It's alive, it's moving. And anything is like that, even something that seems really solid, like a table or a chair, if you really start looking at it deeply, you start to see it's not the same. We think, oh, it's the same table that was here yesterday, but it really isn't. I mean, we know that from physics, but even just visually, it's different at different times of the day as different light hits it and so on, and we're seeing it from slightly different angles. And the more closely we look, the more different things we see there in the grain of the wood that we didn't see before, so it's like, and the whole universe is in that table in a way. I mean, Thich Nhat Hanh, the same Zen teacher, does a beautiful sort of thing where he talks about how the whole universe is in a piece of paper. It's like it's made of trees, and there was the earth that the trees were rooted in, and there's the sunlight that the trees grew from, and there's the lumberjack who cut down the trees, and there's the lumberjack's parents and grandparents, and the cows and the vegetables that they ate, and all, the whole universe ends up being in that piece of paper, and it's the same with the table or the Kleenex or anything. The whole universe is really there in each of us, in everything, and so when we really start looking at form the way a child does, or the way, the lover looks at the beloved, when we really go into it, we find this presence there, this vastness, this wholeness. So it's a kind of interesting thing.
Yeah, it's all interconnected, and it's actually not divided like the mind wants to see. It's all just one whole, and no borders between or everything. And yeah, it's beautiful. And I guess because there is no self actual person, right? Because it's all interconnected with everything else. So in that way, yeah, it's all like one, just doing everything through all these different forms, humans, animals, nature, universe, everything, I guess, thoughts, feelings.
Yeah. And there's, there is, I think it's important to distinguish between the fact that there is incredible diversity and variation here, obviously. Mm-hmm. What's the illusion is that there's actual separation, that these things are actually, separate. It's like, again, it's like the waves on the ocean. They're not really separate. But there's incredible diversity, and each thing, that shows up has its own unique, beautiful particularity in a way. Each moment has its own unique, beautiful particularity. There's a Zen teacher in New York who, in Zen, when you get this lay ordination, they usually give you this exotic Buddhist name, like, Tranquility Mountain or something like that in Sanskrit or something. But what he gives people is their actual name. So like your Buddhist name would be Susan Hill. And I love that, because it's just like, that's your job, is, because we spend a lot of our lives trying to be somebody else, trying to be Nisargadatta or Ramana or Eckhart Tolle or Tony Parsons or Tony Packer or whoever we have put up on the pedestal. We're going to try to be them instead of this being right here, and it's like, so to me, it's so important that it's both. It's like, we're nothing at all. We're absolutely everything. We are this vastness. And we're also this beautiful, particular being, like, that's absolutely unique, has never been here before, will never be here again, one of a kind. And yet you can't pin down what it is, because it's never the same from one instant to the next.
Yeah.
And it's never really separate from anything else. It's never really separate. It is, the whole thing doing this. But but not to deny the wonderful uniqueness of everyone and everything in every moment. And, you know, this particular piece of Kleenex in this particular moment, you know, it's unlike anything else in the universe, actually. And yet the whole universe is in it. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when you're open and not, your mind is not set on anything certain. It's like just that openness. It's like then you can really experience it. Although the unique person, all the individuals, you know, they have all these experiences in life, and it feels like it's this body mind is experiencing it, but it's the whole universe that is just happening, and it flows through my body mind as, you know, I get to experience this and experience this world for a while that keeps changing all the time, and someday death is going to be gone, and who knows what's going to be, but there is no person that really dies either, right? Because it was just an ever-changing, it's dying all the time, actually. It's ever-changing. So as soon as it arises, it's gone. Like right here, as we're speaking, what we spoke about 5 minutes ago, where is it? 5 minutes ago, it's gone. A second ago, it's gone. Just as I'm saying these words, they're gone already. And, you know, so it's like you can never hold on to anything. It's always falling away. Constantly as it's arising, it falls away, right? So in a way, when the body-mind dies, yeah, it's nothing new, and there's just no body anymore, but maybe there's somewhere, you know, life is still happening, and yeah.
Well, life definitely, you know, I mean, there's no end or beginning to right here, right now, you know, it's endlessly changing form, it's endlessly changing shape. And but this here-ness, this nowness, this presence it's always here in some way. I mean, experience can disappear, like every night when we go to sleep, in deep sleep, there's no experience anymore. And the one who's worried about what happens to me after I die is gone. You know, every time I go under anesthesia, you know, I can feel it happening. I can feel experience disappearing. And then next thing I know, I'm waking up somewhere else. You know, and it's like, but there's no, you know, there's no real gap. I mean, it's just, it's always, you know, it's always now. It's always here. Like it's not scary to go to sleep at night or to go under anesthesia. And
yeah, I guess the here, the now, that presence, that formless, that is making up everything, is always there. Even when the form is not there, that's there, and that's what we're all made of. So somehow that just never dies. That's always there, no matter what.
Yeah.
And so there's some peace in that also, just knowing you're that.
Yeah.
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 Also,
yeah.
I mean, you're also the form changing. It's the same, like you said. So, but it's nice to know also that that there is something that's always just there, and that doesn't constantly change. That doesn't die in the way that form dies, and it's just ever present somehow.
Yeah, like, and we really have both, like I often say that in this moment right now, we have both impermanence and presence, you know, and impermanence is the ever-changing part in which no thing even actually forms to be impermanent. I mean, it's so impermanent that nothing even really forms for any persisting, you know, time. So there's the impermanence that's here right now, and it's just, you know, and then there's the presence, the presentness, the immediacy, the here-ness, the nowness, the presentness, which is, you know, here it's the same in every different experience. It's the same, you know, it's that presentness is here, you know, that here-ness, that now-ness is here. Like, you know, if you take a trip from San Francisco to New York, San Francisco appears here, the airplane appears here, New York appears here. You know, it all happens right here. And no matter how old you are, no matter what day it is, no matter, you know, it's always now. It's always now. You never leave now. You never leave here. And that presentness, that presence, is, you could say, the unchanging, the limitless, the immovable. And then there's the impermanence, you know, and they're both, you can't really pull them apart. They're just both right here, showing up all at once as this, you know. And again, these are all words, and the words are always kind of slippery, because as soon as we start using words, we're like trying to pin things down, and we're gonna, like, you know, well, what is that that's gonna stick around even when I die, you know? And it's like, you know, we start trying to nail these things down and everything, and you know, we're back then in that conceptual world, where there's me and dying and what's going to stick around, and, you know, and we're kind of lost in this conceptual fantasy again. Yeah. But if we just come back to right here, right now, there's no problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, well, Joan, thank you so much. It was beautiful. Really, thank you. And
well, thank you. I really enjoyed being with you and talking with you. And this has been a pleasure. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your website, and if you have any events going on or coming up, or Facebook, or how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, okay. Well, I have a website, www.joantollifson.com, and it has some articles I've written. If you go to the outpourings page, it has my writing and some writing, and it also has, there's an audio video section way up at the top, almost invisible, where you can find my audio and video, and and you can find information there about individual meetings which I offer, and any events that I offer. I currently nothing else scheduled, but anything that does get scheduled is on my events page there. And you can find information about all 5 of my books there on my website. And then I also have 2 Facebook pages, a personal page and an author page. And there's a link to, well, actually there's links to both of them if you look around on my website. And I post things fairly frequently on Facebook, little things that I write, and also I put things by other people too. I put videos that I like or whatever by other people too, and also I announce events and things there. Great. So that's how people can find me and be in touch with me if they want.
Good, great, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, take care.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.